I've heard over and over again over the last couple of months, why are we opening up the pool and not preferring that we just give it to East Brunswick residents? Why am I still being charged to use the parking utility out of my monthly pass when I'm not able to go to work? Why am I being charged so much more money for water than I have in the past? And I think the bottom line, the one thing that puts all of those things in a single thread is the fact that many of these areas are operated through what the township calls a utility. And a utility is different than the money that is operated different than the regular government departments and things that are run through your tax dollars. You think of a utility as a business, and everything that's done in that business or in that utility has to stay in that utility. So whether we're talking about the pool or whether we're talking about water or sewer or the parking utility, all of the costs for that utility must be borne by the users of that utility. And if there's a profit that's made in that utility, it must be invested back in that utility. So if the pool makes money, it's not as if we could take that money out and hire someone in another department or buy another piece of equipment or return it back to taxpayers in the form of tax relief. That profit must stay in that utility. And only if that utility gets into such a bad financial position that it cannot cover its expenses or its debt does the town become the guarantor of that deficit and would then have to be responsible. And only in that situation could you make the claim that taxpayer dollars is going towards supporting that utility. To my knowledge, that has never happened. And even with the economic condition that we're in right now, it's our intention for that still to never happen. Let's talk about the pool utility first. To be completely clear, the town did not purchase the land that the pool sits on. That was purchased through Green Acres money, which is money through the state that's used to leave areas in open space that are dedicated for public recreational use. And when that was done many years ago, that purchase was done through those dollars, and that property must be used for a recreational purpose, which at the time was, and is still to this day, a water park. That was determined many years ago. But under the rules of Green Acres, you cannot simply say that it can only be used by East Brunswick residents because East Brunswick residents didn't purchase the property. Was purchased through state money, through Green Acres. Now you can preferentially treat East Brunswick residents by offering them a cheaper admission rate than you offer out-of-towners, but there's strict limitations on the amount of the difference. You cannot look like you're favoring just East Brunswick residents. So that's one issue that most people don't really know. We don't own. The town owns the water park, but it wasn't purchased with your tax dollars. In addition, when we just got permission from the Department of Health to open up the water park, which was literally about a week to 10 days ago, part of that stipulation, in that stipulation, it specifically says that we cannot preferentially open the water park to just East Brunswick residents. Now, we could argue whether the Department of Health should even have the right to put that in their statement. Frankly, I think they should stay in their lane and only opine on the health and safety concerns as we open up a park in the middle of a pandemic and making sure that the advice that they give us sticks to issues of health and safety. So I question whether they should be the one even making that statement, but that's part of the statement. And so we must comply. Now, in the past, the water park has primarily made its profits on, to be honest, people from out of town. They've paid more, and the daily rate was higher, and there was a lot of money that was made. Probably the biggest portion of profits traditionally for this park has actually come from out of town people who are utilizing the facility. And it's a real, we're very lucky. Our water park has been rated as the #1 public water park in New Jersey for several years now. So we should be very proud of the park that we've developed over the course of many years. And so it is something that is well known outside of East Brunswick, and many people travel from quite a large distance to use our water park. And again, most of our profits in the past have actually come from those users. This year, with the COVID crisis, we had to wait for the government to give us permission to open up the park. And unfortunately, we were actually behind most public pools because a pool and a park are considered separate. Pools were just recently allowed to open. We are actually considered a water park, and amusement parks, arcades, things of that sort are, to this point, still only supposed to be opened in phase 3. So it took us a little time to get permission from the state to even open because we were limiting our park to its pool uses, and that's the only condition under which the state allowed us to open. So on top of the fact that they were late in giving information out, we were particularly late in getting information from the state on whether or not we would open at all because they were considering us a park. So the costs of running the park still remain very high, and that was something that the town's Parks and Rec Department and our Recreation and Park Advisory Committee was wrestling with for weeks leading up to this. We were kind of in the dark with what the state was going to allow, and then when they did allow us to open, it really had to take into account it's still a business. We've got bond money that has to be paid for some of our expenses. They're still due, and frankly, the bond payment on that was made back in January, February, before the whole crisis took place. So we're already out close to $400,000 on the bond payment. There's a cost that is incurred in opening up a park every year. There's a cost incurred in the pool supplies. There's a cost incurred due to COVID, meaning that we're going to have to hire more people. We're going to be limited on the number of people that are going to be allowed into the park. We're going to have to be doing a lot more monitoring of public areas, so more people. And every single year when we open up a park, there's training that needs to be provided to all of our lifeguards in order for us to meet all the requirements to run a park, and for our joint insurance fund to make sure that our people that are lifeguards are appropriately trained. This is still an important role that they're providing and could be life-saving. They need to have the proper training. These are all costs that have to come out before a dime comes in to this pool utility. And so with the limited number of people that we were going to be allowed to use the park and the limited number of features within the park that you could use, it would be unfair to charge people a season pass for something that probably half of what the park could offer they can't even use. With our limited hours and limited capacity, we really just couldn't offer season passes. I also did make a comment earlier saying that we were going to do everything possible to make this something that we could provide for East Brunswick residents, maybe getting in an hour earlier, since we weren't really able to do anything with the rates. But it turns out that when we finally got the guidelines from the state on how to operate a pool utility in this pandemic environment, we were told that we would have to have equipment that allowed for people to enter without the use of any cards or exchange of any money. So the systems that needed to be purchased in order to be able to provide that does not have the capacity to only sell to East Brunswick residents or to limit who's coming in once you have a paid pass for the day, be basically a barcode, and there's no way that we could limit the first hour to East Brunswick residents. So the systems simply do not make it possible for us to honor what we were hoping to do this year, and that was to provide some sort of benefit to East Brunswick residents. What we are doing is trying to get the word out, such as formats as like this, social media. We're going to try to contact people on our email list to make sure that East Brunswick residents know that once the season is open, you could purchase your tickets ahead of time. And we're hoping that by getting the word out it naturally will flow to our local residents first. And so in that way, they'll have first dibs, so to speak, on tickets. But the requirements of Green Acres, the requirements of the Department of Health make it very difficult for us to do anything that would give an undue favoritism to our own residents. So despite our good intentions, we're going to do the best we can. But we need to try to make this season somewhat viable so that we can at least break even and cover our costs this year. So I think with that as a backdrop, it understands or hopefully you can understand why we made the decisions we did, why some of those thoughts that we might have had expressed earlier needed to change once the information from the state made it impossible for us to do some of those things.